As the German war machine during World War II was raging through Belgium, the Netherlands, and France, it was a major blow to the Allies. Over 300,000 French and British troops left the French coast to go across the Channel to Britain. During this time, many families moved out of the city and the countryside to escape the catastrophes of war. During this time, the French were frantically trying to protect anything valuable from the Nazi treasure hunters, in an effort to protect their heritage from theft and destruction. One of these treasures that was hidden away was Jean Bugatti's personal Bugatti Atlantic. In a last-ditch effort, the car was taken on a train to Borax for safekeeping. There is no trace of the train that the Bugatti was on, or where the Bugatti ended up after it was on the train. It has become one of the most interesting mysteries in the automotive world, the car disappearing during the chaos and mayhem of World War II. Known as the mystery of La Voiture Noire, it is one of the most shrouded mysteries and leaves behind dozens of unanswered questions. La Voiture Noire, which simply translates to the black car, is one of the rarest and most desirable cars ever made. This is not because it's one of 4 Bugatti Atlantics ever made, an extremely rare car on its own, but also because it's Jean Bugatti's personal car. Jean Bugatti is one of the most influential car designers of all time. He was the son of Bugatti's founder, Ettore Bugatti. He took after his dad's inherent interest in cars. Jean had a quite remarkable sense of aerodynamics and proportions, which influenced the companies in the 20s with their design. His unique design and styling, matched with his father's brilliant engineering, made Bugatti one of the best automotive manufacturers in the world. La Voiture Noire and all of the Atlantics are based on a Bugatti Type 57 chassis. 710 Type 57s are made in total, but there is many varieties in the Type 57. If there was a T in the name, like a Type 57T, it was a tuner version, which was considerably faster than the base model. If there was a C in the name, like a Type 57C, that meant that it was supercharged and was also faster than the base model. If there was an S in the name, like in the Type 57 SC or ST, that meant that it had been lowered and was one of the later generations. This brings us to the Atlantic that had a supercharger and was lowered, making it a Type 57 SC. But the Atlantic was different than any normal Type 57 SC because it had smoother, more flowing lines. When working on the first prototype for the concept car of the Atlantic, they used a material called Ectron, which is extremely light, but there's one problem with it: it can't be welded. So Bugatti used a technique that was common on planes at the time. They created external rivets that made it possible to connect the panels. On the Atlantics that were for production, they used aluminum body panels, but they still kept the dorsal fin rivets for the style. There were 4 Bugattis made, and all the chassis have very interesting stories. Known as the Rothschild, chassis 57374 is the first of its kind to roll off the production line in France back in 1934. It is the only surviving Aero Coupe, a designation given to the first 2 cars. It currently resides in the Mullen Automotive Museum in California. The model used to belong to Dartmouth neurologist Peter Williamson, owner in one of the greatest collections of Bugattis in the world. Chassis number 57591 was originally owned by Richard Pope when it was painted a rich light blue. He kept the car for nearly 30 years until it was bought by Bernie Price, who occasionally borrowed it previously. The car suffered a light crash during the commemoration, which led it to get stuck in a ditch. The car was handed to a wealthy businessman, Anthony Bamford, and shortly after that given to another collector. Eventually, fashion designer Ralph Lauren bought the car in 1988 and commissioned a complete restoration with Paul Russell & Co. They restored the car to its 1938 condition, and is still in the hands of fashion designer Ralph Lauren. The penultimate car, chassis 57473, is the most controversial of them all. The family bought it in 1936, sold it back to the factory in 1937. Then it was destroyed in a train crash in 1955. None of the 2 occupants survived, and the wreck remained at the train station for nearly 10 years, till it was sold to a junkyard, and nothing is known about the car anymore, and it was probably parted out. The 4th one is the one that puzzles enthusiasts. Chassis number 57453, also known as La Voiture Noire. All 4 Bugatti Atlantics were known participants in car shows and being publicity for Bugatti. At some point, Jean Bugatti's personal vehicle was being used for publicity, and it is rumored that the La Voiture Noire was later bestowed upon Bugatti racer Robert Bionci after his victory in the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1937. It subsequently found its way to another Bugatti racer, William Grover Williams, before being returned to the factory in 1939 upon his move to England. From 1939 to 1941, a handful of Bugatti engineers are said to have been driving the car, although no former owners were registered according to the records. But there is no sign of the car after the early 40s, as the Nazis took a tighter grasp of Europe and France. Where the Bugatti was, the records show the vehicle was hidden away for safekeeping on a train headed to Bourg, another small city in France. However, from there the trail goes cold. There is nothing more, and it's unclear if the car ever even arrived at its intended destination. There are four main theories that have been proposed of what has happened to the car. The first is that the car was put on a train, it arrived and was hidden away by a person who understood the value of the car and put it somewhere far away from the public. This could have happened, but it's not super likely because it is unlikely that the reports and records of the car have not been made since 1940 and that it has been hidden all this time. The second is that the Bugatti never left the factory premises and fell into the Nazis' hands. This is unlikely as well because, similar to the first one, it is unlikely that no reports or records would have been made from this car if it was found by the Nazis. The third is that it just slipped away from its intended destination and was hidden away for the past 80 years, and it could just be in someone's barn in France. The last theory is that the La Voiture Noire met its fate during an air raid, reduced to nothingness, and was never recognized again. From the rubble and debris, there is no evidence that has come to light since the Voiture Noire left on the train. There is no definite records confirming its arrival, no paperwork documenting its journey that has ever been found. There is no eyewitnesses' accounts to rely on. If found now and sold, the La Voiture Noire is valued well over $100 million. It might even be the most expensive car in the world. But that is if it ever is found, which seems very unlikely at all.
In 2019, Bugatti released the La Voiture Noire, based on the esteemed Chiron platform, but is far different from the Chiron, having many visual changes that emulate the elegance of the Atlantic. Over 65,000 hours are put into the car, showing Bugatti's dedication to meticulous handcrafted and making unique hypercars, underscoring Bugatti's philosophy of prioritizing quality and precision in the manufacturing process. But it still may never be known what happened to the original La Voiture Noire, or the fourth and final Bugatti Atlantic.